Hi, my name is Mike and welcome back to the shop. This is episode number 12 of our sport plane build. And in this episode we're going to be building the tail feathers for our little 35cc sport plane. Obviously this one had a bad day, but we'll use it as an example and show you exactly how these tail feathers are made. For this plane they are flat, they're not airfoil. I have made many airfoil tails before. Here's an example here of a elevator and a horizontal set that are airfoil. If you can see, I don't know if you can there. You can certainly make your tail feathers airfoil in shape. There's no reason that you can't. It's a little bit harder, a little bit more involved. It's not really harder, it's just a few more steps. You have to make the templates, you have to cut the foam on the airfoil design, and for this size plane, a 35cc, particularly the mission of this plane to be a super durable, easy to build plane that still flies very well. The flight envelope of this plane is not going to know the difference between an airfoil tail setup and a flat setup. You generally don't see, or I generally don't see, a difference until we get up into about the 50cc range for this style plane. Now certainly if this were a very light floaty 3D plane, which this plane certainly is not light, it's designed to be super durable. If it were a super light plane, then we would be more concerned about getting some airfoil effect off the tail, but for this plane it's not going to make any difference at all. And as a matter of fact, there are many lightweight floaty 3D planes out there that are running flat tails like this. So I get that question a lot. Why is it a flat tail or flat surface in the tail question? And it's just easier and a whole lot simpler. So a couple of years ago I was trying to make the decision on how big to make the tail. Now there are a lot of calculations that you can use, the size of the wing, the size of the tail, the length of the fuselage. That all gets kind of confusing, unnecessarily confusing in my opinion. One of the easiest things to do is just look at a 30cc plane out there and get an idea of about how big the tail is, how tall your rudder is, and about how wide your horizontal stabilizer and elevator are. And if you notice, they're around the 24-25 inch range. So that gets us in the ballpark, and from there we can fine tune for whatever flight characteristics we want. And I just sketched this one out on a sheet of paper a couple of years back, maybe 3 or 4 years back, and decided that I wanted huge elevators and I wanted a huge rudder. I wanted more tail control for this plane to make it a lot more fun to fly. And if someone is flying it that is a beginner or something like that, you just turn the rates down and you don't have that much control or that much authority in the back. But if you want to fly it all out and fly it 3D, crank the rates all the way up, and as you can see, this one will run about 51 degrees of elevator back there, and this is the trainer high wing version, and it's about 45 degrees, I think. This plane here was a flat top design with no turtle deck. Of course, you see a turtle deck on this one. It uses the exact same tail setup, so I don't have to build a different tail feather set for the high wing version or the flat top version than I do for the turtle deck version. The exact same parts will go in both of those planes, which is nice, and it's that way by design. So this one happens to be right at 25 inches long, and we'll get into all of those measurements here in just a little while. But I don't know if you can see that or not on the camera, but all I did was simply draw it out, and from there I made my templates, and we've made plenty of templates before, and you know how to do that by now, so we're not going to go through that again. If you have not seen the episode on making templates, there are at least 2, maybe 3 out there so far where we actually make the templates. So this is the vertical set template. Obviously it's a rudder and the little vertical stabilizer, And for a long time, I was making these parts in one large slab. Let's see if I have that piece here. So we have a triangle shape here, and then I would go to the bandsaw and I would separate the vertical from the rudder, the whole assembly, separate the rudder from the whole assembly, and then ultimately the vertical would get trimmed off because you don't need all of it to fit here. So I did that for a long time, probably a couple of years. I would separate those parts, and then I realized that I could increase the strength of these parts by changing the grain direction on the two of them. The grain direction on the vertical stabilizer is running horizontally, and because one, it doesn't have that much force on it, but two, if it did, it would be in this direction, right? So we wouldn't want the grain running up and down, because then it doesn't give us any benefit of the strength in the wood. If the grain is running this way, we get the benefit of the strength in the grain. So then a question becomes on the rudder, which way do you run the grain? Because it gets two types of forces here. Obviously the force that wants to break it this way, you twist it that way. So you would want the grain running across here. But up here on the compensator, we have a force that wants to twist this way. And if you get in some sort of situation where it topples over, which this plane does topple over a lot because I fly close to the ground and do a lot of silly things, then you want the grain in some cases running this way to handle some of that strength that could pop the rudder in this direction. So the compromise there is to run this grain diagonally. So I decided to start cutting these in two pieces, and then I realized that it's even easier to make these in two pieces. One, it's easier to cut on the bandsaw and easier to make the parts. So I made a template for the little vertical, and of course a template for the rudder. And what we do to make these parts is we start out making a slab that is probably a 1/4 inch larger than we actually need. And I'm stalling here looking for the template. There it is. The template for the horizontal. So this is the template for the horizontal. Of course, it has the lightning holes, and it is the exact shape of the horizontal before it gets its triangle stock added around the outside, which of course will give it rigidity, and on the back side help us with our hinge attachment. So this piece is exactly the same size as this template here. So what we need to do is make a piece that is oversized from this so that we can trim it later on. And that's what this slab is. It's a piece that is made up. We'll make a piece just like this here in a few minutes. And of course it is our standard setup. It's the foam with the 0.75 or 3/4 ounce fiberglass on either side of the foam, and then 2 sheets of 1/16 balsa to finish it up, put it in the vacuum bag, and 3 hours later we come out with this. So then we will take this piece and tape the template to the top of it and route it out to the exact size, and then route our lightning holes out, and we end up with this. And then we'll take the triangle stock and work our way all the way around and end up with the finished product. So I think that's a pretty good explanation of where we're going. Let's go ahead and get started on making the parts. Okay, so here are our horizontal pieces before they get sheeted. Obviously you can see that there are a couple of pieces of foam for the horizontal with a piece of balsa in the center, and then essentially the same type of construction here for the elevator halves, with the exception of the grain is running in different directions on the 2 balsa pieces. Now, one of the first decisions that we need to make is how thick of a surface are we going to have. In previous versions of this plane, I have run a total overall thickness of 5/16. That meant that my foam piece was 3/16, and then the 2 pieces of 1/16 balsa sheeting on the outside obviously was 5/16 or 8 millimeters. 8 millimeters metric is a little easier to measure, so that's generally the way I keep up with it. So what I am doing on this version, because I want to run a 50cc on this plane as well, in at least one version of this plane, is I'm going to increase that by 1/8 of an inch. So I will start out with a 5/16 piece of foam, or 8 millimeter piece of foam, and then a 16th on either side. Will come out to 7/16 total thickness, as opposed to 5/16 in previous versions. I don't know how much difference that's going to make. We'll see. So there is a piece of 8 millimeter balsa in the center here, and I have elected to make that 6 inches. It's kind of an arbitrary number there, an arbitrary length. Remember, the fuselage will come through here, right? So that just gives me a little bit more strength on either side of that fuselage in case I want to have some flex right there. If it tumbles, somersaults on the runway or something like that, and hits the ground hard, that'll give me a little more rigidity. Also, there is a strip of 8 millimeter or 5/16 balsa, which is 1/2 inch tall across the back. This is one of the second or third time that I have done this. For a couple of years, I was making those parts a lot like the wing trailing edge, to where I would use the hot wire and cut out a slot and then put a block in for the Robart hinges. I got thinking about putting a long strip in, and didn't know that if it would save me any weight or cost me some more weight, because obviously weight back there on the tail is of a premium. So what I did was I measured these in grams, of course, and I measured that piece in grams, and the amount of epoxy that is used to epoxy those in, and found out that darn if I don't come up a few grams lighter even running one long strip across here. My first versions were 2 short strips, and of course this piece came to the back, and then it doesn't make any sense not just to run one long strip across, and that way you get a little bit of the grain to help you out in rigidity right there as well. So future versions will have this strip going all the way across the back to receive those Robart pin hinges, and the same with the elevators. There is a piece right here that is, of course, 8 millimeter, same as the foam, and the grain on this one runs this way. I think you can see that there, and the purpose of that is to give some rigidity in flex this way. If that grain were running this way and we had an issue, that grain wouldn't do us any good strength-wise. It would just pop. So the grain running in this direction gives us a great deal of strength, and our control horn will mount in this piece, and of course that will help distribute that load across the entire width of the elevator there. And the connecting plate between these two will fit right there. It's a 1/16 aluminum plate. We'll deal with that in an episode later down the road. Rather than a U-shaped piece of wire coming across, which is the typical way to join elevator halves, I like to use a 1/16 plate back there. It's just more durable. It's easier to control. You don't have to worry about it bending or flexing. It's just a lot more stable, and in my opinion, a better way to do it. So these are the parts that we need to make, and I have drawn out on a piece of foam here. This is 4 inches wide, and I'll cut a lot of them out of this while I'm cutting and have the saw set up. This, of course, is the elevator, the elevators, and that, of course, the horizontal stab. And so let me cut these up, and we will start gluing them together. a little narrow. Let's give it a little more. It's 812 and 812. $820. That's pretty darn close. Yeah, I like that. Good. So we need, I'm down to my last one of the pieces of triangle stock here, and all I have done is laminated up some 3/16 and 1/8 to get my 5/16. So we don't need a lot of CA at all to laminate these together. Just the lightest bit, because all we want to do is keep this part from slipping apart before we get it in the vacuum. So what we're worried about primarily is just making sure the two pieces stick together. We don't need a super reliable bond there. Just a little bit of CA is certainly going to keep that from coming apart. And you don't need to edge glue these pieces here. The epoxy is going to go down there and in the vacuum and make that a super strong assembly there. And it already is. So save as much weight as you can with CA. Just the tiniest little bit of CA track there will be fine. And you can make these as wide as you want here. You could go over as far as you want. Obviously the balsa is going to be heavier than the foam and it's not necessary. I just wanted to go all the way, make it wide enough that it carries all the way to the top. Obviously if it's narrower or shorter, it doesn't get all the way to the end of the elevator, and I think that it's important to transfer all of this strength to the end of the elevator. It just makes things a little bit stronger in my opinion. So this piece here, we will just cut out as many as we can out of this blank that we just made. And that'll get us 4 of those. Okay, so we're going to use some 5-minute epoxy here. That goes pretty quick. It makes us go pretty quick, so you may want to consider a 30-minute epoxy. And As usual, it's loaded up with micro balloons. It's actually more micro balloons than it is epoxy. Our bond strength back here on this foam is not critical at all. We're more concerned with the just attaching the wooden pieces to the foam. And I'm going to put just a little bit of alcohol in that epoxy. That's going to extend our work time and make it a little easier to spread. We'll change the viscosity just a little bit, thin it. Okay, and we'll need to work quickly with the 5-minute epoxy, of course. So that piece will go there, and we need a piece that will go all the way across. Should have cut that ahead of time. And this is 5/16, of course. If you don't have 5/16 by 1/2, you could just laminate it up and cut it into strips on the table saw. I've done that many, many times just to keep from having to buy these. There we go. Like I said, we're not worried about bond strength here. The epoxy, when we sheet this, is going to get pulled down in this joint and make it a super strong joint. All we want to do is tack everything together while it's to hold it together while it's going into the vacuum bag. Now you could use foam safe CA here. I don't, because I can't lighten the foam safe CA. This stuff is incredibly light now. It's like I said, it's about 2 to 1 micro balloons. You can't do that with the foam safe CA. And as long as we're stronger than the foam, we're going to have a good strong bond. And of course that epoxy is going to be, even with that many micro balloons and that little bit of alcohol. And we don't have to worry about getting a good uniform coverage here. Well, all we're doing literally is just tacking it on there. And I'm just pulling the pieces together while I tape. The tape is just a clamp, of course. And then pull it nice and snug. Made that one just a tad too short. All right, that'll do for the elevator. And before we lose the epoxy race, let's put our pieces in for the elevator halves here. And we can cut that to length a little bit later. Okay, so we've got two sets of horizontal parts here. Obviously the elevator halves and the horizontal stabs themselves. So I'll go ahead and untape these. They're ready for sheeting and vacuum bagging. And I think what we'll do is save that for the next episode. We should be able to get all of these sheeted, get the lightning holes cut out, get the trim put around the outside, get the Robart hinge holes cut, and all of that. And putting the joiner in. We should be able to squeeze all that into another episode, but this one is running right at 30 minutes, and that's a good time to stop this. So I will see you in the next episode. I've got some untaping here to do. And make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already. If you were able to get anything from this video, or if you liked the video, make sure that you subscribe. That's very, very important on the YouTube algorithms to keep the videos going. And make sure that you visit the Facebook group if you have any questions or anything like that. There's a growing forum on Facebook. It's RC Foam Core Wings, the Facebook group. Join that and chime in on any of the conversation that you want to. If you have something that you want to add, any recommendations or ideas or something like that, or questions about what's going on, that's a pretty good forum to have some dialogue back and forth. Also, keep the YouTube comments coming. I like those. I try to respond to all of them, or at least I do respond to all of them. Some of them it takes me a little bit of time, but I really like the comments, and some of the comments or questions get pretty detailed, so I refer folks over to the Facebook group. Also, don't forget, I'm putting and it's not finished yet, it's a work in progress, a web page together, and it will list all of the resources and still photographs of everything that we're doing here. And some pretty cool builds from other guys out there around the world that are building planes using these and very similar techniques. So that is rcfoamcorewings.com. So check those out. And of course, the website is a work in progress, so just excuse that it's an ongoing construction site. And I will see you in the next episode when we pick up vacuuming this.